Yep.
All right, so I'm going to be touching kind of on the significance of like this spending and how much is getting wasted and how much, like, kind of just paint a better picture of where all this money is going. So, my partner over here on the affirmative had mentioned that $355 billion is going to be spent on nuclear weapon production in the next decade. This was done by a study, they're called the Plowshare Fund, and they've kind of done a lot of nuclear spending prediction, and they have a fairly accurate 10-year prediction to where overall the U.S. is going to be spending $620 billion over the next 10 years. $355 billion of that is just into the production of nuclear bombs. Our Navy, we have the largest Navy on the entire planet, but we still feel the need to upgrade it. My partner had also mentioned the 12 submarines that are in plan to be made. Now these 12 submarines, they can carry 24 long-range missiles each. Each one of those missiles can carry 4 nuclear warheads, and each one of those warheads is 40 times the strength of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. So just some quick math: 12 subs, 24 missiles each, times 4 warheads, times 40, times the strength. That's the equivalent of 53,000 Hiroshima bombs just within our Navy's submarines. And yet they still feel the need to keep throwing money at this, and all of these submarines are being upgraded. Let's see here. The submarines won't enter service until 2031. They'll cost $93 billion to produce, and throughout their lifespan will cost $350 billion to maintain. All of the submarines that we currently have in the Navy can handle what we need. I mean, ideally, we don't ever want to have to get into a nuclear conflict, but I mean, if it comes down to it, our Navy can handle anything. He had touched on other navies upgrading their arsenals and producing submarines. But according to, give me one second here. According to Secretary of Defense Robert M. Gates, the U.S. Navy has shrunk since the Cold War in terms of tonnage, but by one estimate, it is still larger than the next 13 navies combined. And 11 of those 13 navies are our allies. So our Navy can handle anything that anyone tries to throw at us. I mean, despite the significant naval modernization programs underway in some of these countries he had mentioned, no one intends to bankrupt themselves to try to challenge the U.S. in a shipbuilding or submarine building contest, as you will. So next, I mentioned that the U.S. is on track to spend between $620 to $661 billion on nuclear weapons and related programs over the next decade. Now, the $355 billion is just towards the production of these nuclear weapons, but with that comes a bunch of other programs that are absolutely necessary to make sure everything is safe. You have environmental and health costs. Producing all of these nuclear chemicals creates a lot of human health impacts and environmental contamination. The U.S. is planning to spend $100 billion in the next 10 years on just cleaning up the mess that we make from producing all of these nuclear weapons. There's nuclear threat reduction, which is necessary, but with the more nukes that we create, the more we have to protect them, and the more we have to spend making sure that there's not an accident. So just simply not producing them, or as many, cutting on this funding, it will cut funding across the board for the entire nuclear program. Let's see here. There are signs of hope. There are some things happening that, you know, they're saving some money somewhere. One example, in 2012, Congress passed a continuing resolution that eliminated funding for a new plutonium bomb factory in the Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory. It was originally estimated to cost $400 million to produce this lab and to upgrade it, but the cost quickly exploded to over $6 billion. And that's all to churn out 60 to 80 bomb cores a year for reasons that no one could really say. Senate agreed with the administration to delay this program for 5 years, which effectively killed it. An alternative building is in the works, and it can produce enough replacement bombs to still be a nuclear threat, but there's not going to be producing 60 to 80 new cores every year. But this saved the U.S. $5.5 billion just by simply saying, no, we're not going to build a humongous new laboratory and waste all this money here. And yeah, so he touched a little bit about Russia and Iran and all of the recent talks with the nuclear war race. But I mean, we have enough to handle literally anything on the planet. It's very hard to imagine any type of military mission that requires us to drop 1,000 nukes or 100 nukes or even 10 nukes, yet we maintain a stockpile of nukes that can destroy the entire planet a couple times over. No one really ever bothers to tally up the costs. Most of I had mentioned most of the costs that all the data I've been getting is from the Plowshares Fund. They're the one collecting all this data on how much money we're actually spending, because it's really hard once you actually get into it to find where all this money is going. Yeah. So he also had touched on something saying that we're not saving any money by shrinking our arsenal, but we will save a lot of money by shrinking our arsenal, because you just cut costs across the board. It's just, I don't have any like legitimate source that could back that up, but it's just logic. The less nukes we have, the less you have to maintain them. And I mean, as long as we have enough to pose a threat to the entire world, which we do, there's no need to continue to produce more technology and waste all this money when it could go elsewhere within the military. There's, you know, endless possibilities to where the money could go, but that's a whole different debate within itself.